There's a reason fear exists. It's not a flaw in our wiring. It is our wiring. From the earliest moments of our species, fear helped us survive. It told us when a predator was near. It whispered warnings about cliffs, storms, and the unknown. Fear kept us alive. But here's the shift that changes everything. What was once a survival mechanism has now become a prison. We're no longer running from lions or hiding from the weather. Today we're afraid of not fitting in. We're afraid of being judged. We're afraid to fail, to try, to speak, to stand out. Fear has gone from keeping us alive to keeping us small. And yet we walk around with the belief that fear is the enemy. That if we could just get rid of it, we'd finally live freely. But that's not quite right. Fear isn't the enemy. Avoiding fear is. When we avoid fear, we delay growth. When we avoid fear, we give it power. Think of the things in your life that you've put off. The conversation you know you need to have. The dream you keep pushing to tomorrow. The decision you've been circling for years. Behind each of those is a version of fear. Fear of change, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough. But none of those fears have the power to stop you unless you let them. It's the avoidance, the running, that makes fear grow. And here's something deeper. We fear what we don't understand. Ambiguity is fear's breeding ground. The less we know, the more space fear has to fill the gaps with worst-case scenario. That's why clarity is such a powerful antidote. When we clarify our values, our purpose, our next steps, fear begins to fade. It may not disappear, but it loses its grip. Clarity doesn't eliminate the challenge, but it gives you something stronger to hold on to. It replaces fear with intention. I once worked with a leader who struggled with public speaking. He's brilliant, sharp mind, empathetic, creative, but the moment he stepped onto a stage, his voice would shake, his knees would buckle. He hated that fear ruled him in those moments. But instead of working through it, he avoided presentations altogether. He delegated speeches. He stayed behind the scenes. He convinced himself it wasn't his role. But here's the truth. It was his role. People needed to hear from him. His team looked to him for direction. And by avoiding the fear, he avoided the impact he could have made. So it started small, 1-minute talks, then 5, then 10. He leaned into the discomfort. He didn't eliminate fear, he faced it. And in doing so, something changed. The fear didn't vanish, but it shrank. What once felt paralyzing became manageable. It no longer led him, he led through it. That's the lesson. You don't wait for fear to go away to act. You act and fear begins to go away. We have this illusion that bravery means fearlessness. It doesn't. Courage is acting despite fear. It's walking into the unknown, knowing it might not go perfectly, and still choosing to go because growth demands it. Growth doesn't come in comfort. It comes in the stretch, in the strain, in the unfamiliar. Fear often shows up at the exact border between who you are and who you could become. That's the moment you choose. Now, you might think that sounds great, but I'm not built like that. I've always been afraid. I've never been confident. But let me ask you this, how many of your fears are yours and how many were handed to you? How many fears were passed down from parents, teachers, society, who told you to stay safe, to not risk too much, to be realistic, to not aim too high? We inherit fear like old furniture. Passed from generation to generation, collecting dust and never questioned. But you don't have to keep what doesn't serve you. You can return that furniture. You can redesign the room. And here's something else we forget. You don't have to do this alone. Eliminating fear isn't a solo mission. Some of the bravest people I've ever met didn't fight their fears by themselves. They did it with people around them who believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. That's what support looks like. It's not about someone dragging you across the finish line. It's someone sitting next to you saying, you've got this. And if you fall, I'll still be here. Connection reduces fear. When we isolate, fear multiplies. When we connect, it shrinks. That's why leadership isn't about barking orders or projecting invincibility. It's about creating spaces where people feel safe enough to try, to speak, to fail, to grow. It's about building trust that turns fear into fuel. There will always be fear. The goal isn't to eliminate it from existence. The goal is to no longer be ruled by it, to feel fear and move forward anyway. To shift from asking, what if it all goes wrong, to what if this is exactly what I need? So today, I challenge you to do something small that scares you. A conversation you've been avoiding, a risk you've been putting off, a dream that keeps nagging you because it knows you were meant for more. Start small, but start. Because every time you choose to face fear, you shrink its power. Every time you act despite fear, you grow into more of who you're meant to be. Fear will knock on your door often, but it doesn't have to live in your house. You get to decide who stays. And the more you choose courage, the less space fear has to take root. So the question isn't, how do I eliminate fear forever? The question is, how long am I willing to let fear be in charge of my life? Because the life you want, the purpose, the impact, the legacy, it's all waiting for you just on the other side of fear. Fear thrives in the unknown. It feeds off uncertainty. When we don't know what's ahead, our mind fills in the blanks, and it usually doesn't do it with optimism. We imagine the worst case scenario. We picture failure, rejection, embarrassment. We don't see the mountain as something we can climb. We see it as something that will bury us. And so we freeze. That's how fear works. It multiplies in silence, it grows in confusion. And the moment we feel lost, it swoops in and starts whispering all the reasons we shouldn't move forward. But what if the problem isn't the fear itself? What if the real issue is the lack of clarity? Well, because when we know who we are, when we understand where we're going and why, fear loses its edge. It may still be there, but it doesn't control us. It doesn't define our decisions. Clarity doesn't eliminate the difficulty of the road ahead, but it gives us a reason to take the next step. Think of a time in your life when you felt totally overwhelmed. Maybe you were facing a big decision, whether leave a job, start something new, speak your truth in a relationship. Chances are what made it most terrifying wasn't the decision itself, but the fog surrounding it. You didn't know what would happen. You didn't know what it would cost. You didn't know how others would react. And that uncertainty became the breeding ground for fear. But then, maybe after reflection, maybe after conversation, maybe after hitting a low point, things became clearer. You started to see why this decision mattered. You realized what was at stake if you didn't act. You got a glimpse of what was possible on the other side of discomfort. And suddenly, even though the fear didn't vanish, something inside you felt stronger than it. That's the power of clarity. Clarity gives direction. And direction gives confidence. Not because everything is guaranteed to work out, but because now you know what you're willing to do anyway. Clarity aligns you with purpose. And when you're anchored in purpose, fear becomes noise. I remember talking to a young entrepreneur once. He had this brilliant idea, a product that could truly impact people, but he was stuck. He had funding lined up, a prototype built, even a small community waiting to buy, and yet he couldn't move. Every day he found new reasons to delay, more research to do, more competitors to study, more planning. Eventually I asked him, what are you really afraid of? And he said, I'm afraid I'm not ready. I'm afraid people think I'm a fraud. So I asked a different question. Why did you start this in the first place? He paused, then told me about his younger sister, how she struggled with the exact problem this product was built to solve, how he watched her lose confidence, how he wished something like this had existed back then. In that moment, I saw something shift in him. He wasn't just building a business anymore. He was fighting for someone he cared about. He had clarity. And when you have clarity, fear doesn't disappear, but it becomes smaller than your mission. We're not afraid of action. We're afraid of taking the wrong action. And the best way to move past that fear is to pause and get clear. What do you value? What are you willing to stand for? What kind of life are you trying to build? These questions don't have to be answered overnight, but the more you sit with them, the more power you reclaim. Because clarity doesn't mean knowing every step. It means knowing why you're stepping at all. We often assume we need confidence to act, but it's the opposite. We act, and then we gain confidence. And we act with much more courage when we're clear. When we understand what matters most, we stop chasing approval. We stop playing small just to fit in. Clarity makes you resilient. It becomes your inner compass. And when you're clear on who you are and where you're headed, you can walk through fear, not around it. It's no surprise that some of the most courageous people you meet aren't the loudest, the boldest. They're the most clear. They know their values. They know their principles. They know what matters more than fear. And so they show up again and again, even when it's hard, even when they stumble, even when others don't understand them, because clarity gives them something fear can't take away: direction. There's a quiet power in that. It's not about eliminating fear by force. It's about shining enough light on your path that fear no longer blocks it. It's about realizing that fear often fills the silence and clarity gives you something to say back. Ask anyone who has built something meaningful, a movement, a company, a legacy, and they'll tell you there were moments of fear, but they'll also tell you they kept going because the why was louder than the doubt. Clarity became their shield. We waste so much time trying to feel fearless. What we should really focus on is feeling clear. Because when your vision is focused, your energy is directed. And when your energy is directed, you stop spinning, you start building, creating, leading. Living. If you're facing fear right now, don't just ask, how do I get rid of this feeling? Ask, what don't I understand yet? What am I still unclear about? And once you know the answer, take one small step forward, even if it's just writing it down, calling someone you trust, or making a tiny move toward the future you want. That's how clarity grows, through action. The world needs more people who are clear, not just confident. Because clarity leads to courage, and courage, not fearlessness, is what builds a life that matters. So, the next time fear speaks up, pause, go quiet, get clear, and let that clarity speak louder than the fear. Because clarity isn't just a tool, it's the beginning of freedom. Fear is a strange thing. It feels huge when we think about it, yet strangely small once we confront it. That's the paradox. It's rarely the fear itself that holds us back. It's the avoidance of it. Fear left unchallenged grows in our minds. It exaggerates, distorts, and takes control. But the moment we face it, the illusion starts to fall apart. Most people think you need to wait until you're no longer afraid before you take action, that one day you'll wake up with enough confidence, enough strength, enough certainty to make the leap. But that day rarely comes, because fear doesn't go away by waiting, it shrinks when we face it. And only then. There's a story I'll never forget. A friend of mine had dreamed of running a marathon for over a decade. He trained in spurts, read all the right books, bought the shoes, followed the plans. But every time the race clock approached, he'd find a reason to delay. An injury, a busy work schedule, not the right time. In reality, he was afraid. Not of running, but of failing, of not finishing, of looking weak. And so he stayed in the loop of preparation, always getting ready, never actually starting. Then one day something changed. His daughter, 6 years old at the time, asked him, "Dad, when are you going to run your race?" Not if, but when. And in her mind, it was a given. She believed in him without hesitation. That question hit him. He realized he was trying to be fearless instead of being courageous. So he signed up the next day. He ran it. It wasn't perfect. He didn't break any records. But he finished, and when he crossed the line, he cried, not because of the pain or the distance, but because he realized the fear that haunted him for years was never as powerful as he had made it out to be. He just needed to face it. This is what fear does. It builds up in the waiting. We build whole narratives around why we can't do something, but when we finally show up, take that first step, make that first move, something shifts. We realize we're not as fragile as we thought. We're not as alone as we feared. And we're far more capable than we imagine. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the willingness to act in spite of it. Every act of courage is born from the presence of fear. Otherwise, it wouldn't be courage. And the thing is, courage doesn't show up in giant leaps. It's not always heroic or loud. Most of the time, it's quiet. It's a decision made in silence. It's picking up the phone. It's showing up to the meeting. It's saying what you really feel. It's choosing to try again after failing once before. The only way to get stronger is to do the thing that scares you, even just a little. Think about it like going to the gym. You don't build muscle by reading fitness blogs or watching other people lift weights. You build it by showing up, doing the reps, feeling the strain, and doing it again tomorrow. That's how emotional strength works too. Every time you face fear, you grow. Every time you lean into discomfort, you gain power. Not power over others, power over your own doubt. I often meet people who say, I want to start this project, but I'm not ready. And my response is almost always the same. No one is ever ready. If you wait until you feel ready, you'll never start. Readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. You decide to begin while still afraid. And in the process of beginning, you become ready. You become the kind of person who can. That's what people misunderstand. Confidence doesn't come first, it comes after. It's earned by walking through the storm and realizing it didn't destroy you. Confidence is the residue of courageous acts. And the same applies in leadership. Great leaders aren't the ones who avoid fear or pretend it doesn't exist. They're the ones who model what it looks like to walk through fear with purpose. They're willing to make hard decisions, to say hard things, to admit when they're unsure but still show up for others. That kind of leadership inspires trust, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And it's not just in big moments. Every day gives us a chance to shrink fear by facing it. Maybe it's asking for help. Maybe it's telling someone how much they mean to you. Maybe it's applying for a job you think you're not qualified for. Maybe it's being honest with yourself for the first time in years. Whatever it is, when you do the thing you fear, you strip it of its power. And the beautiful part, it creates a ripple. When someone sees you do something brave, especially something that scared you, it gives them permission to do the same. Courage is contagious. You never know who's watching. You never know whose fear you're helping shrink by choosing to face your own. Fear isn't something you eliminate once and for all. It's something you manage. You dance with it, you learn its patterns, and then you decide again and again not to let it drive. You don't need to defeat fear, you just need to step past it. One step, one conversation, one choice at a time. And slowly the grip loosens. The difference between the life we have and the life we want is often one difficult step. One moment where we face the thing we've avoided. When we finally stop negotiating with fear and start walking through it. So the next time fear shows up, don't wait for it to leave. Don't give it more space than it deserves. Look it in the eye. Do the thing anyway. Because you'll find that most of the time, fear wasn't the mountain, it was the shadow. And once you face it, you realize you were always bigger than it. Most of us are wired to seek comfort. We want to feel safe. We want things to be predictable. We want to know what's coming next. And that's human. It's not weakness, it's survival. Our brains are built to protect us from danger, to avoid risk, to keep us out of pain. But here's the hard truth. The life you dream of, the life filled with meaning, impact, and growth, does not live in your comfort zone. We like the idea of growth, we like the results of growth, but the process of growth, that part's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's full of doubt, awkwardness, and failure. And most of us aren't afraid of growth, we're afraid of what we'll have to feel on the way there. Because growth demands that we leave behind what's familiar. It demands that we step into the unknown. And nothing invites fear faster than uncertainty. But that's the thing, comfort and growth rarely exist in the same room. You can't have both, not at the same time. Every time you choose comfort, you're saying no to a piece of your potential. And every time you choose growth, you're saying yes to the discomfort that comes with becoming more. That's the trade-off. And it's not easy, but it's worth it. Think about a time when you felt truly proud of yourself. Not just relieved, not just happy, proud. It probably didn't happen while you were coasting. It happened because you did something hard. You stepped up, you stretched, you chose to move forward when it would have been easier to stay still. And in that moment, something in you changed. You grew. I remember speaking to a woman who had worked at the same job for over 20 years. She was excellent at what she did, respected, valued, comfortable. But somewhere deep down, she knew she had more to give, more to create, more to become. The problem wasn't that her job was bad. The problem was that she had stopped growing. She had mastered her role, but lost touch with her ambition. She didn't feel afraid every day, but she didn't feel alive either. And so after years of playing it safe, she made a decision. She walked away. She didn't have it all figured out. She wasn't sure what came next. But she was clear on one thing. She was no longer going to let fear of the unknown keep her locked in the familiar. The first year was hard. She faced doubt, setbacks, even loneliness. But by year 2, she had started her own business, something she dreamed of but never thought she had the courage to do. And she said something I'll never forget. I've never been more scared, and I've never been more free. That's what growth gives you. Freedom, not freedom from fear. When you choose growth over comfort, you're telling the world and yourself that you believe in something bigger than your current circumstances. You believe in what's possible. And that belief becomes your fuel. But let's be honest, comfort is tempting. It's cozy, it's predictable. It whispers, just stay here, you're doing fine. Don't make things harder than they need to be. And if you listen to that voice long enough, it will convince you that fine is enough, that safety is success, that avoiding pain is the same thing as living a good life. But it's not. The best things in life, the things that light your soul on fire, don't happen because you played it safe. They happen because you chose to stretch, to evolve, to grow. And every time you make that choice, you reinforce something powerful, that you are not defined by your fear, you are defined by your willingness to walk through it. This applies to every area of life. In relationships, choosing growth might mean having the hard conversation instead of avoiding it. In your career, it might mean taking on a role you don't feel quite ready for. In your personal life, it might mean admitting that you've been coasting and deciding that good enough is no longer enough. And here's the secret. The more you choose growth, the easier it becomes. Not because the challenges disappear, but because you start to trust yourself. You build a track record of courage. You look back and realize, I've done hard things before, I can do this too. That self-trust is one of the greatest gifts growth offers, and it only comes from choosing to be uncomfortable on purpose. We live in a world that celebrates ease, fast answers, instant gratification. But the most meaningful transformations don't happen fast. They happen when you consistently choose the harder path, the one that stretches you, shapes you, and sometimes scares you. They happen when you stop asking what's the easiest way and start asking what's the way that helps me grow. Growth isn't always exciting. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it means letting go of what you thought you needed. But it always leads somewhere better, somewhere fuller, somewhere truer. The world doesn't need more people chasing comfort. It needs more people willing to grow. Even when it's hard. Even when it's slow. Even when it doesn't guarantee immediate reward. Because that's where leadership begins. That's where transformation happens. And that's where fear starts to lose its power. You don't have to make massive changes overnight. Just start by noticing where you've been choosing comfort over growth. Then pick one place, one moment, one decision, and choose differently. Choose the path that challenges you, that humbles you, that teaches you something new. Because when you do, you'll find something remarkable. Fear begins to shrink. Not because it's gone, but because you've outgrown it. And that is the path to becoming the person you were always meant to be. There's something paralyzing about fear. It has a way of making us feel small, helpless, like passengers in our own lives. We feel stuck, trapped. And the worst part is, the longer we sit in that space, the more powerless we begin to feel. Like no matter what we do, nothing will change. Like life is happening to us, not because of us. And that's a dangerous mindset, because it convinces us to give up before we even try. But here's the truth most people forget. Fear loses its grip the moment we move. It's not thinking that sets us free, it's action. Action is how we take back control, is how we reclaim our power. One small step can be enough to remind us that we're not as stuck as we thought. Most people think they need to wait until they feel ready. That clarity comes first, and then we act. But more often than not, it's the opposite. Action creates clarity. Movement generates momentum. Confidence comes after the first step, not before. I've met so many people who are brilliant, capable, talented, but frozen, stuck in thought loops, paralyzed by what-ifs, running worst-case scenarios over and over again. And you can see it in their eyes, the frustration, the exhaustion. They're not lazy, they're just afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of losing something, time, reputation, opportunity. And so they stay still, hoping that the fear will go away on its own. But fear doesn't vanish with time, it festers. The only way out is through. And the way through begins with action. Years ago, I worked with a young man who had a dream to start a nonprofit that supported education in underserved communities. He had the vision, he had the passion. But he spent years researching, planning, strategizing, and never launching. He kept saying, "I'm not ready yet." But the longer he waited, the more doubt crept in. He started asking if he was even the right person for the job. His dream didn't die overnight. It died in small pieces, chipped away by fear disguised as logic. Then one day, someone asked him a simple question. What's the smallest step you can take today that moves us forward? Not the biggest, not the boldest, just the smallest. He thought about it. And he said, I could email a teacher in my old neighborhood and ask what they need. So he did. One email. That's it. But that one action led to a conversation. That conversation led to a school visit. That visit led to a pilot program. And 2 years later, his nonprofit was real, alive, impacting kids every single day. All because he stopped waiting for courage and started acting with intention. That's the power of action. It interrupts fear's momentum. It shifts our energy from panic to purpose. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be forward. We often overestimate what we need to begin. We think we need a full plan, a guaranteed outcome, total confidence. But what we really need is to start, to make the call, to write the paragraph, to show up. Action builds belief. Because when you act, even in a small way, you send a message to your brain, I am not powerless. That single message can change everything. Fear thrives in silence and stillness, but action makes noise. It stirs the air, it changes the atmosphere, it reminds us that we are participants in our lives, not observers. And this isn't just personal, it's leadership. Leaders don't eliminate fear for others, they model what it looks like to act in the face of fear. They don't wait until everything is safe. They take responsibility, they take initiative, they move. And in doing so, they give others permission to do the same. When you take action, you also shift your focus. Fear is internal, it's self-centered by nature, but action forces us to look outward, to engage with the world, to respond to real people, real needs, real opportunities. And that shift alone can change your emotional state. Because fear shrinks when you're in motion. Purpose expands when you engage. One of the most underrated forms of action is service. When we feel afraid, one of the best things we can do is help someone else. Not because it solves our problems, but because it pulls us out of the spiral of self-focus. When you show up for others, you remind yourself that you still have something to give. And that reminder is often enough to reignite a sense of direction. Of course, not every action leads to success. Some lead to failure, embarrassment, setbacks. But even failure is better than paralysis, because failure teaches, failure moves, failure sharpens. What fear hates most isn't success, it's progress. As long as you're moving, you're growing. And as long as you're growing, fear can't win. You don't have to take giant leaps. Start with the next right step. That's it. The step you can take today, the step that aligns with your values, the one that honors who you want to become. Then tomorrow, take another. That's how change is made. Not in sudden bursts, but in steady moves. When we act, we reclaim the narrative. We move from victims of fear to architects of our own story. And the more we act, the more we believe we can act. It compounds, it builds, it becomes a rhythm. So if you're afraid, don't try to talk yourself out of it. Don't wait for the fear to disappear. Accept that it's there and move anyway. Pick one thing, one small, uncomfortable, forward-moving thing, and do it. Because at the end of the day, fear doesn't have the final word. You do. With every decision, with every action, with every step, you are not powerless. You never were. You just forgot how much strength is found in doing the next right thing. And once you remember that, once you act, you begin to live not in fear, but in motion. That's where control lives. That's where freedom begins.